The World Health Organization reports that 74% of all global deaths are due to chronic illness. Oftentimes, we're left feeling scared, overwhelmed, and a bit panicked. You may feel like you've been completely blindsided, or maybe that your body has completely betrayed you. Coping with the weight of that can feel overwhelming, and it's not uncommon to start to panic. Your brain may think, how can I possibly live like this for the rest of my life? How can I possibly figure this out? How can I, just how? How can I possibly live the rest of my life like this? And there's possibly not even a cure. One of the scariest things about learning and trying to process with a chronic illness diagnosis is the fact that this thing might really be here to stay. For most of us, that's an automatic trigger, and here comes the depression, anxiety, just overwhelming thoughts. Now we have this cascade of feelings, emotions on top of the pain, the everything going on in our bodies that we can't even make sense of. You may have been in the hospital, you leave and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I even just go through? And what am I supposed to do now? We have this automatic trigger of anxiety, depression, hopelessness, despair. That is exactly what I experienced when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 17. I felt crippled by this big, bad disease. I was depressed. I was anxious. I feared for my future at such a young age. And we fall into what I like to call the chronic illness cycle, right? So we get diagnosed. We may be okay, we may not. We may go through some, what's the word I'm looking for? We may accept it right away. We may not. We may be in denial. Regardless, at some point we meet some grief. And with that grief comes the depression, the anxiety, the fear of the future. And that's where I was. I fell into this cycle of mental health challenges. It was just so much overwhelmed with, what does this even mean? How do I even take care of myself? Nevertheless, in my strange attempts to cope with this, it was really just me fighting with reality. Long story short. And what did I get from that? Well, if you're familiar with multiple sclerosis, you understand that it's a nervous system thing, autoimmune disease, and I had these lesions. Well, during that time, I was doing nothing but racking up more lesions, damage to my brain and spinal cord. And I just couldn't break free from this cycle of mental torment that this disease I thought was causing me. But really, it was my own thoughts about what it meant to be chronically ill. So I had these thoughts, and that was, my body was reacting to that by not getting any better. So I had more lesions, I had more pain, more symptoms, more disease activity, more worse test results, which caused more fear, more anxiety, more all of the things that I didn't want to feel. I felt so trapped, so trapped by my own mental prison. But being caught in this emotional cycle ended up being the exact thing that made my health worse. The truth is that in the midst of our emotion, we often forget to look at the complete whole truth. Focus on the worst case scenario, focus on our pain. We focus on the negative. But the truth is that our life is not actually over. The honest truth is that we're not in immediate danger. The secret to actually coping with chronic illness is acknowledging it for what it actually is. Chronic illness. I know you're like, what the heck are you talking about? But what does that actually mean? By definition, chronic means persisting for a long time. So you could take that and run with it and let your mind just go on a tangent, right? And let it take you away to this very distant land of anxiety, depression, fear, long, blah, 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 blah. But I love this quote by Tony Robbins, who helped me out of that cycle that I talked about earlier. And he says that where our focus goes, our energy flows. Where our energy flows, whatever you're focusing on grows. In other words, your life is controlled by what you focus on. So we can focus on this term chronic and assume the worst. Or we can be wise and understand that our bodies are listening. So if the reality is that we, one, have a chronic illness, and two, may not ever live another day without it, choose to narrowly focus on the terrible possibles, the terrible things that we feel. If we look for it, we can find 10 million things. And I literally mean, no, actually, I think that there are an infinite things that you can complain about with life with chronic illness. Like, that is not up for debate. Chronic illness is no walk in the park. I am never going to gaslight you or minimize your pain, but we do have the opportunity to realize that we've been granted a lifelong chronic opportunity to learn and listen and actually get to know ourselves and our bodies. Not only that, but devote ourselves to caring for it. Though we may not have a choice in getting a disease, getting a diagnosis, having to live with this, suffering is a choice. Let me say it again for the people in the back. Suffering is a choice. The truth is that with most chronic diseases, the path of your disease is not set in stone. You have not been sentenced to eternal suffering and ruin. Be told, we have way more control over the course of our disease than we let on or even realize. There's many factors that contribute to the course of a disease. I cannot wait to share with you ways in which each one of us can choose to take control of our health and get started on this journey. But in the meantime, let me know if this was helpful. Am I crazy for thinking about chronic disease this way, or am I a little bit genius? Do you agree with me? So be sure to click the like button, subscribe, and even if you don't agree with me, I want to hear your thoughts. Seriously, this needs to be talked about, and I want to keep the conversation going. I honestly can't wait to hear what you think. Until next time, be well.